Varnishing. So I've got a wooden boat which is varnished, and I've had it for 23 years. So every year I varnish it myself. And I sold varnish for a long time, so I get people saying it doesn't work. So I hear the problems and things. So that's my kind of qualification for doing this. But after 23 years, you pick up a few tips and you work in boat yards and you work out things yourself. So hopefully in an hour I can kind of divulge a few tips that might help you avoid the usual kind of pitfalls that occur. We'll start off with preparation, and as of course we all know it's all to do with preparation. And so most of tonight will be concerned with the preparation. We get onto the varnishing kind of at the last moment, because really the varnishing is the easier bit. So we'll start off with well, before we start off preparation, we better just do the health and safety bit. Goggles were over specs, really only in case you get a splash in your eye. Masks, I quite like these ones with a soft seal, very comfortable to wear. Just avoid those nuisance masks you can get sometimes, you know, cheap and cheerful, but they don't actually do anything to help. Although a better bet is to try and avoid dust, and we'll come on to that. Gloves, rubber gloves when you're using solvents. Puggy gloves are an absolute favourite of mine. They're not watertight, so you can't really use them if you're bathing your hands in turps and things, but they're brilliant for sanding. You get a really good grip on them. You completely forget you're wearing them. They just kind of come part of your hands. You can even type them.
All this kit is sold here, is it?
It is all sold here, and if it's not all sold here, it'll be sold here imminently. We'll start off with just bare timber, and this is going to bring us on to machine sanding. And I just want to kind of go through the various machines that are available. I'm a bit of a fan of Festool. Festool system, I don't know, anyone familiar with Festool kit? It's German made, it's absolutely kind of the top stuff. It all links together, so when you buy a box, it will clip onto another box. You can get trolleys. So the vacuum system is here. On top of it, got your sander. On top of that, you can put your drawers of sandpaper. You know, so it's all kind of integrated system. The machines are built to last. This is about 10 years old. They're incredibly efficient, at least 3 times as fast as, you know, your normal kind of sander. So rough sawn timber to ready to varnish. So it is quick, and you can imagine if you're just trying to mat down something, they're super fast. You can sand down a hull of a boat quicker than people can polish glass fibre. I mean, a couple of hours to get you around a 26-foot boat. They've got 2 settings on them, which this is an aggressive setting, and then they've got a light setting, and then the speed setting as well. So you can go.
Can I just ask what are those running at cost-wise?
It's not cheap. They're about £350 for the tool, and then you've got the thing as well. So it depends on how long you're going to keep your boat and what size boat you've got and how much of this you're going to do. But I mean, as an investment, it's worth it, and it's not only worth it for speed, but it's worth it for health as well. Because I don't know if you noticed, there is no dust. It just doesn't. There is no dust at all. You know, it's fantastic.
Do you or anyone else rent them?
Not yet, but it is a kind of concept that could well happen. I mean, they are robust enough to wrench. You know, you won't break them.
It's 500 quid's a big outlay. I mean, fantastic piece of kit, but
Yeah.
We use once a year.
but
I can just say I have a friend who has the whole collection, but he
Right.
uses it on cars.
Yeah.
The sanding discs, how do they?
Well, the sanding
Masters,
discs are
that's what,
unique in that holes. Most sanding discs, the holes are on the inside, and that's why you get so much dust, because most of the dust spills out from the outside. So on Festool, the holes are on the outside. Yeah, I mean they're a little bit more expensive, but they're a premium grade paper because you've got no dust, and because they got a special stuff that cuts cool, they don't clog. So you could sand the hull of my boat with one sheet, you know.
One sheet?
Yeah, one sheet of 320.
Well, I go through about 4 packets.
But having said that, once they get dull, it is worth swapping them off, and it will get through more sheets if the varnish is soft, because you know. So if it's a hard varnish, but just on the machine front, just to show you the kind of stuff that is available. I don't want to. I mean, I could easily spend the whole evening just talking about Festool, but these are quite a handy. If you've got a smaller boat, it's a handy shape, gets into spaces. It's nice and light. Actually, if you're doing a deck head, if you're connected to a vacuum, it sticks to the deck head, so you just push it around. So it's quite a nice little tool for doing interiors. Just on these vacuum things, I made a mistake. I bought a bigger size vacuum, thinking not much more. Why not buy the bigger one? It's a bit of a mistake with a boat because it's nice to be able to lift them up on a ladder, bang them in the cockpit, take them indoors. So that mini one, I think, it's good really for your average size yacht.
Is this like wet and dry? I mean, what if the hull was fouled?
The vacuum does do wet and dry, yeah, but obviously this is dry. Yeah, well, we'll come on to kind of dirty varnish stuff afterwards. So yeah, now there is another sander which is quite unique. This is unique because it's a linear sander, so it only goes in a straight line back and forth. Because of that, you can use it in confined spaces, which you can't do with an orbital sander, because if an orbital sander goes into a groove, it kind of bangs on the side and just causes chaos. But this comes with a series of foam blocks that you can shape yourself. So this one here I've made specifically for sanding the kind of a piece on my boat that's very difficult to get at. So this just clips on where we are. And then it just goes back and forth. So you can make these this shape or round, you know. You have to warrant it's 350 quid again, you know, so it's a pretty limited tool, but it does do some unique things. You know, you could shape that to the top of your tow rail. You could do the whole of your tow rail in 10 minutes or something. And then I suppose the other sanding machine that's on the market nowadays is the Multimaster. These have all upgraded now. These tools are great, they oscillate. Do you know about them? They don't spin, they just oscillate. So in fact, on this blade it'll cut through steel, but it won't cut through your hand. So they use them for taking plasters off and such like. Well, I don't cut through steel and then show that, because they're good at some things, but they're useless at other things. So you can get a triangular sanding pad for them, and they are just next to useless. They're just so laborious. But this thing is a genius, this little finger sander. This gets under all your scupper holes and into corners. So that is a good little tool for doing the final bits. So when you come to sand your boat, the trick is to go, you know, big first, and then just work your way through your tools until you end up hand sanding. Or we'll come on to hand sanding.
I'm broke.
I'm broke, yeah. Well,
if you hired somebody else to do it, you could have it broke too. Every year.
It is an outlay, but
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But if you're saving 3
It's a
4
one-off,
days
it's a
work,
one-off cost, isn't it?
yeah,
Well, the sanding bits, is I go through packets of them and they're like 5 or 6 or 7 quid in B&Q, you know, and I can very easily go through, because they just clog up.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah.
So you take that over a number of years of sanding, I suppose it.
So this grit here was 120 grit. I mean, I could have been using 40 or 60, it would be even faster. But so if you were going to be preparing this, if this were a piece of nice new timber that you're going to prepare to varnish, 120 is the right grade to use for your first coat of varnish. They say you should finish with the grain. Well, to be honest, you don't have to with this kind of tool. You can't really see whether you finish with the grain or not. But yeah, if you're going to finish with the grain and you haven't got a linear sander, you have to use a hand sanding block. If this was a piece of new thwart or something, where you're going to get problems is along this edge. And if you look at any piece of varnish that's gone, I just took this off a little dinghy, which I didn't varnish originally, as you can. But I mean, you can just see it's just always edges that go. So, and this really hasn't been. It's had the edge taken off it, but really it should have been pencil rounded with a router. So your varnish work will last a lot longer if you can route a nice corner off. Well, just remove the corner off everything. So if you were going to apply varnish to that, the next process would be to vacuum it, just to get any final dust out. But by the way, this vacuum works automatically with that machine, and it turns off 5 seconds afterwards, so the hose is empty, so you don't get any dust. Just remove any dust initially with a vacuum cleaner, and then wipe down with, I would suggest you wipe down with isopropyl alcohol rather than white spirits. And most people seem to use white spirits. I'm just going to show you what happens if you do that. I've got my rubber gloves on now. So it kind of does the trick. It does get, the last remnants of dust off. But if you use isopropyl alcohol, which is an azeotrope, so this does the same thing, really. Just removes those last bits of dust out of the wood. But it's a bit kinder on your hands. It's a rubbing alcohol. It's an azeotrope, so it mixes with any moisture in the timber and makes it flash off. So it actually dries the timber out, and you'll see in a few minutes why I recommend using it rather than white spirits, because it will, in a couple of minutes, this will have flashed off completely, and this will remain completely damp. And what tends to happen is when the white spirits has gone, people think it's gone entirely, but actually it's only gone on the very top surface, and you're causing solvent entrapment. And that solvent then loosens the bond of the varnish on your very important, the first coat, and you've suddenly got kind of solvent entrapment underneath it, so you kind of, so it's bad news. So we'll see that that effect in a few minutes. Existing good varnish. So, well, all of these things are a bit of a judgment call as to how much work you're going to put into them and when you want to go sailing and how posh you want the thing to look at. But on this, for instance, this is a dinghy, it's kept in a garage. I wouldn't bother patch priming this. It would just be too much effort to put, you know, to treat these little bits where the varnish has gone. So I would just do the whole lot in this case, and give it another couple of coats and be done with that. But you can be a bit clever when you organise your varnishing. These edges, obviously the things that are going to go, well, if you were to varnish this top edge, you could go along that like that and then leave it to dry, and then when you turn over, you can do the same. So you're getting the edge is actually getting a double bubble. And there's quite a few techniques like that which are handy on tow rails and things. I'll show you a bit later on. So with this, obviously you can use the machines, be super fast, but I would definitely avoid using machines near the edges. It will just tear the varnish off. You'll never get any build up. And even on bits like this, you know, you have to be quite delicate to make sure you're trying to build up the varnish rather than take it off. But you've got to mat this back to get a grip for the new coat. Well, the first thing to do is actually to clean the surface. Lots of people sand and then they clean. But if there's grease and such like, it's just going to be forcing it into the timber. And if there's grit, it's just going to be causing kind of graunching that you don't want, because you can use a much finer grit on this. So just wash it down basically. I'm not going to wash it down because it takes forever to dry.
What can you use then?
This is just a foam cleaner that I use it for all sorts of things. It's just a you can use it for cleaning computer screens and keyboards and almost anything really. It's quite a harmless little spray.
I've been decorating recently at home, and sugar soap's what I've been trying out.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the traditional thing. I don't think it matters really, as long as you remove the grease. Actually, if you've got heavy grease, if you're doing a bilge or something, you've got engine grease, then using things like isopropyl alcohol aren't so good because they flash off too quickly. They haven't dissolved the grease. There are specialist cleaners for doing that. That are kind of this is a all grip 340 cleaner which dissolves. It's specially designed for prepping up before you paint and varnish. But you'd only really need that if there's something that's caked in engine splatter or something. So hand sanding, if you've got a surface like this, you'd use 320, 360 or 400 grit. So let's go 320. These are great little things, these foam blocks. They're really comfortable. You don't waste any paper, it's just straight on, off you go. I would recommend you chonk through the paper if you're hand sanding. Don't really struggle for ages with blank paper. It's just not worth it. They cost about £2 for 10 something. It's worth just discard as you go. There's another type of block that we do that's got a very, very soft edge, and it's also got the advantage that you can, if you need to get inside something, you can actually kind of do that. With hand sanding, putty gloves are fantastic because they, especially when you end up doing the little bits around the side, ultimately your fingers go. But it's surprisingly quick. So all you're trying to do is get a matte surface. It's like just seconds and it's done. So I'm racing with this shredder. So when it comes to the corners, You know, you really got to just be as gentle as you can going around there, otherwise you'll just be taking it all off. So vacuum it. I mean, you might, once you've vacuumed it, you might see some bits that you've missed and want to just go over it again. You could use wet and dry. The problem with wet and dry is you can't really see where you're going. It wouldn't be good to use wet and dry on something like this because of all this bare timber. You'd be waiting forever for it to dry. But as time goes on, wet and dry is, you know, a reasonable thing to do. It's quite a good thing to do if it's raining and you need to make progress because you can actually sand in the wet. But it is, you have to be very methodical where you're going, just to remember that you've done that, because it's all shiny, you'll never be able to tell whether you've matted it or not, so you just have to work out a method of working your way along. The other thing which is quite a good wheeze are these abrasive pads, which come in various different grits, and these use in conjunction with the hose, so they're great for anti-fouling or boot tops and things which obviously you don't want to sand, get the dust into the air. But you can, if you need to clean down, if you've got something that's really grubby, you can clean and abrade all in one hit, and they last for a long time. They're quite cheap and cheerful, so they're useful things. And also between coats, if you've just applied a really nice coat on that, a lot of people just literally go like that. You know, the area that you're dealing with. Then sand back 120 grit and then apply a coat of dilute varnish on the first bit, and then you have to build up the 6 coats. And then you take the masking tape off, and then you're sanding the whole thing, and then giving the whole thing 2 coats, so that will kind of blend in. Not quite. I might as well just go on, if you're doing a repair on the boat, if you've just had a ding, so this is different to patch priming because you're not going to do the whole boat, all you're doing is just mending a little ding, then you'll never be able to blend out the varnish. Don't think that you can patch it and kind of with the brush, because it will just show up as a load of brush marks. It won't blend in at all. So you're much better off just making a nice neat square or a diamond and sanding within there. And then just apply the varnish into a patch and just accepting you've got a square. They look quite neat, these little kind of odd patches. But, they look better than kind of brush mark showing. Okay, so if you've got a case where the varnish is so bad that it needs to come off, then there are various techniques for getting the stuff off, and it's not all bad news. That's actually just a scraper using nothing. If the varnish was very thick, you'd probably have a problem doing that. But with a hot air gun, try and get one with variable speed and variable speed and variable heat. You can just choose a heat that just softens the varnish up, is all you're trying to do. I mean, I've got no idea what this is, but just keep it moving, and it basically just makes The funny thing is, old varnish comes off much easier than new varnish. New varnish tends to kind of go into slightly sticky balls, and it's a little bit more of a struggle. You have to do a bit more scraping. But old varnish, I'll just show you a picture of. Yeah, this, I don't know, can you see that? This, can you see that picture? 56 coats of varnish. And it came off really quickly. It was only about a day's work to strip the whole thing back. But it was just a matter of just warming that varnish up. And then actually I just used a scraper to go underneath it because it was so thick. It just kind of tumbled off. But it does leave a kind of residue behind. And that's where these come in handy because you can just clean the timber right back with the residue. You can nearly always get it off with heat and a scraper without having to use paint stripper. But if you do use paint stripper, there's a Blackfriars make one that you don't have to neutralise, and it tends to get used by all the posh boat yards up the Thames for doing the kind of slipper launches and things, because you don't have to then hose down the whole boat with loads of water and soak the timber.
Well, I can honestly say, I don't know if anybody else has used these, but these scrapers are the best tools ever invented. They've just made life so much easier from stripping paint and varnish and anything. It's just a fantastic tool. It really is.
Yeah, no, they are nice. It's just ergonomic, really.
Yeah.
It just puts them. So, yeah, patches. What you have to decide when you patch, when you take the varnish off and put a patch in, it's going to be a different colour. And you know, it really is silly to think that you can bleach the timber or do something to make it the same colour, because what's actually happening in reality is the varnish over the years goes honey coloured. So again, it's quite thick and then it goes like a pale colour. So the colour of my boat is actually quite a dark red colour, but it doesn't look that now because it's got 20 odd years of varnish on it. So you can see along this edge here where it's got this kind of dark patch. Well, that's just where the varnish has gone, and I've had to, you know, just patch it in. Just haven't got time to strip the whole thing back. One day I'll strip the whole thing back, and then it will all blend in. But the observation along here is quite interesting, that it's the edge of this margin board up against the Sikaflex type caulking where the varnish has gone, and that's because the moisture has got down the side of the Sikaflex and under the varnish. So, you know, in the main part of the board it's fine, but it's just along the edges, and that's a very common kind of problem. But don't try using oxalic acid or anything like that to bleach out. It won't work. So, preparation. Right, types of varnish. 2-pack. This stuff will last, well, they say 4 times as long as traditional varnish. It's glass hard, and it literally is glass hard, so it will crack if you hit it. And that's where the problem kind of lies, that if you do hit something, it'll crack and then moisture will get in underneath it, and then it's very difficult. You won't be able to patch prime this. It's just too hard to to make a repair on it. So, personally, I would confine 2-pack varnish to going on things like plywood surfaces, cabin soles if you're going to varnish your cabin sole, cabin tables and such like. It has to be a very stable substrate. It can't be like a clinker boat or a carvel boat where the timber's moving back and forth. But it is strong. I mean, you could do your toe rails in it, and you could walk with gritty shoes and it would withstand it, and it would last longer. Traditional varnishes, single pop varnishes, and there's loads of different types. Polyurethanes and Compass is a polyurethane single pack varnish. This Epiphanes varnish, which is the varnish I use. It's probably no better than anything else. I originally bought it because I like the can. But I've got used to using it, so it's a good idea to stick with what you know, really, because you learn to progress with it. And then there are oils like Dex oil, yeah, which is a kind of Norwegian impregnation oil. This stuff just soaks into the timber, so it doesn't lie on top of the timber. In fact, you have to make sure it doesn't lie on top of the timber. But it soaks up an awful lot of material. It's surprising. This will only cover about 2 square metres, which is a scary amount of material that goes in. You just lay on coat after coat after coat. And there is a top coat you can put on to get a gloss. I haven't got any here, but you can get these kind of murky stain type finishes that are said to last for a long time. I don't particularly like them. They tend to be not very glossy. And they tend to have a kind of poor. It doesn't look like nice varnish work really. And then there are some new generations of varnishes that are coming out. Coalan's one that people might have heard about. And there's some other ones coming out in kind of competition from All Grip and such like. And they reckon they'll last for 10 years. I don't think you can just wave goodbye to a wooden boat for 10 years and expect it to be. If you work on a boat every year, you catch all of these little things, and you end up with a longer lasting, properly maintained boat. Location for varnishing. Well, you want to be out of direct sunlight if you can. Obviously, you don't want wind, so the best place to varnish is indoors if you can. But then you've got to weigh up being indoors on a nice day and being outside on a nice day. So it's quite nice being outside. So the only problems with being outside is to do with deadlines, really. If you're in a hurry, you can't kind of go up to Scotland and say, right, I'm going to varnish my boat in a week, because who knows what's going to happen in a week, So if you've got 1 week to varnish your boat, then you've got to get it indoors.
That's the sunny week.
Yeah, I mean, I have done it outdoors in Scotland, and I had a fantastic week. It was brilliant. It was like I couldn't believe that happened. But if your boat's going to be outdoors and you've got a choice, ask the boatyard to position it on the north-south axis, and then the sun comes up on the left and goes down on the right, so you can work in the shade over lunch and then in the shade after lunch. And just have a look around the yard at what trees are there. I can't tell you which trees they are, but some of them, they cause problems. Little bits come out, and they normally come out at that time when you're doing the varnishing in the spring. So if you're into trees, they're worth looking up. The other thing to do before you start varnishing is just make sure you've got fantastic access around the boat, because if you stop, it's a mess up. Basically, you have to. Varnishing is all to do with speed. As soon as you stop, it's going to tack up. You can get brush marks. So try and make sure you've got a scaffold, a frame, or a platform, or at least a space for your ladder.
So if you're doing a tow rail, do the whole side continuously.
Yeah. Well. On the big screen. So if this was the hull of the boat and this is the water line down here, there's a temptation to varnish from here up to here, because on the ladder you can get access to all of that. And actually this is quite slow doing this bit with this kind of decorative stuff and the tow rail at the top. And you've got a nice place there where you can stop. So what I do is I just varnish this piece. So it's very quick, smooth kind of surface, and then I let that dry, and then I put masking tape around there, pink masking tape, and then I varnish this piece up over the tow rail, and then when I do the margin board, I do this and back over the tow rail, so the tow rail's getting double bubble again.
When you're doing, just rule of thumb, when you're doing a tow rail, your boat is about 30 feet?
It's 26 foot.
26
yeah.
feet. How long does it take you to do a coat on one side of the tow rail, or to do the whole tow rail?
It'll take about an hour and a half to get around, something like that. But the hull takes about an hour to do one side, so it's about 2 hours, maybe a bit less. do the
It's
whole-
really moving.
Yeah, no, it is moving, yeah. And, yeah, no, you have to move. So timing, yeah, when you start doing it, I like to start really early in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. And then I just get a chamois leather out, just wipe down the hole so it's all the dew is off it. Just wait for a little bit longer for maybe use a bit of paper towel. And as soon as I'm happy that everything's dry, I wouldn't do this if you're working on raw timber because you might need a little bit more heat to bring the moisture out of that. But as soon as everything's dry, I like to start. So I'd normally like to be starting at about 7:45 in the morning or something. So by 9, sometimes I've finished the boat and I'm off to work. So, I'm done. I can varnish a whole hull quite quickly and then go. And it's before the yard opens up and the tractor starts moving and people start parking and dust gets up and the heat is, there's no heat there. So what you're trying to do is to get the brush marks to fall out. So anything like sunlight and breeze sets those brush marks up. So it's good to start early, and it's good to stop at least 4 hours before dusk, because especially on flat surfaces, the top surface, you'll get dew comes down and it will cloud the varnish. But, it's not always the end of the world if the varnish goes cloudy. Sometimes it will just work its way out after about 24 hours, but certainly worth avoiding. So don't work on too late, better off stop, clean your brushes, go for a beer. Brushes. Now, this is a rubbish brush, a very good brush, a good rubbish brush. And it's definitely not suitable for varnishing. We sell them because they're handy for working with resins. You might want to dab on a bit of primer, use a bit of hammerite, got no thinners, but it's just completely waste of time trying to varnish with a brush like this. It just won't hold enough material. You'll be constantly dabbing on. When you buy a brush, if you're in a shop, before you buy a brush, just bang it on the side, and if it's a really bad brush, and I've seen some, you'll find all the hairs come out, or at least a lot of them come out. So, yeah, just give it a good whack on the side. A lot of product placement going on here. Purdy brushes. I used to like Hamilton, and I still do like Hamilton, but Hamilton are a natural bristle brush, and they're good. So if you like working with Hamilton Perfection, then absolutely fine. The problem with bristle brushes is they're a bit of a sort of clean properly. The varnish kind of goes into the bristle, and the bristle is quite like a rough material. And although you think you've got it clean, actually there's a lot of material in there, and if you kind of flick the brush under a bright light, you'd see loads of dust coming out. And a lot of people say that the varnish is no good, it's gone off, it's rubbish varnish, but actually brush hygiene is the most common cause of problems with gritty finish. It's very difficult to get a finish without any gritting at all. And if you're doing a top coat and you've got perfect conditions, sometimes it's worth just getting a new brush. But even with a new brush, it's a good idea just to wash it before you use it. So that's a Purdy brush. The hairs won't come out. They kind of keep the shape. It'll last for people who've painted 10,000 council houses with these things, and they're still going. So, but what you need to do next is put a little V on it, because it's a varnish brush. Don't mix it up with a paintbrush. They are quite different things. Once you dip paint in it, it won't be a very good varnish brush. So keep that as your special varnish brush. So application. How are we doing time-wise? All right. Oh yeah, the other brushes are foam brushes, of course. That we're going to do a little bit of foam brush technique right at the end. Yeah. So these are Jenny brushes. These are the original brushes. They've got a kind of sheet inside to make them fairly stiff. A lot of classic boat yards use foam brushes as their preferred method of using it, and I suspect the reason is to do with the difficulty of cleaning brushes really, really thoroughly. Whereas with these brushes, you can get a brand new one out of the box and you just throw them away afterwards. And the technique will go through the technique of using these later on.
Or if you put it in a plastic bag.
Yeah, what, overnight?
Squeeze all the air out and you
Well, they will last overnight in a plastic bag or over lunch, but we'll go on to cleaning brushes afterwards. Okay, so the time to varnish has come. First thing I do is damp down the floor with a watering can, just so that the area is just wet and you're not kicking up any dust. It's all kind of, and we're obviously in a nice still environment. So put on your boiler suit, clean boiler suit, not the one you've been sanding in, and your health and safety stuff. Make sure you've got access to the whole area you're going to be working on. And then, as I say, mask off the area. So you have to have a plan. Don't just start varnishing and then wondering, it's lunchtime, where I'm going to stop. If you think you can varnish half a hull, put a piece of masking tape down the bow, so you've got a finish point. Otherwise, it won't work. This kind of brushing it off and hoping you can blend in kind of idea. So just mask. And if I'm doing a coach roof and I think, well, I won't be able to. I need to stop somewhere. I just put a split down the middle. Just work up to the masking tape, and then if you're masking while you're varnishing, this pink masking tape is made of Japanese rice paper. It's 5 newtons per 10 millimeter tearing strength, so it won't take newsprint off. You can use it on wallpaper, and you can use it on varnish that hasn't. It's just dry, and it's a precision edge, so it's a very, very nice tape to use. So, yeah, and the planning before you start about this double lapping is always good. If you can get extra coats on the toe rail, it's good news. These are the essential ingredients. This is a tack rag, and you'll never get a good finish without a tack rag. So sticky rags, anyone used these before? Just slightly sticky. And it just brings the dust off anything. So just check your paint kettle. Never stick your brush into the varnish pot. Now we might be wanting to put this back into this afterwards. So put the lid back on. And then just keep it clean. Don't let stuff drip down the side of, so this can might as well look brand new. So blue roll, it's worth it, 10 quid, but it's worth it, the pleasure of just being able to grab another bit of tissue and carrying on. So, so there's the varnish in the pot. Now, this is a conditioner. Now, if you're working indoors, this varnish has been made by Epiphanes to be a perfect varnish. So they've made it the right consistency to work in ideal conditions. If you're working indoors, you'll probably just be able to use it straight, not in the first coat. Dilute as per the instructions, 50-50. But if you're doing it
with what?
Dilute with what?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one of two things, but never this. This is just not the same as thinners number 1 or Epiphane brush thinners. And you can tell it's not the same because actually there's a different thinner if you're spraying to if you're brushing. So they are very specific, and if you use the wrong one, you might have a hell of a problem getting the product to dry. especially on your first coat, it could be weeks before the thing dries. So it's just not worth saving the amount of work you put into this so far. Just get the right thinner. So, and Epiphanes would recommend that you use Epiphanes brush thinner for paints and varnish, and International will say thinner's #1. But there is an alternative, which is this stuff, which is Troll. I'm not sure what it is, probably a fish product or something, but it's a rust conditioner and a paint conditioner. Now you can use it, it's got a fantastic penetration, so, oh, we didn't see the, forgot to see this, this happen. In any case, believe me, white spirits takes a long time to dry out. It's got fantastic penetration, so it goes deep down into the wood. So even on a first coat, you can mix this 50-50 with varnish, and it gives the same kind of penetration as adding thinners to it, but with the advantage that you're getting film thickness build up rather than just having the stuff flash off into the air. But the really good thing about this is it retards the drying time. So if you're working in poor conditions, you can add, say, 5% to the varnish, and it will slow down the drying. So if there's a little bit of wind or a little bit of sun, then adding this is the thing that makes the brush marks fall out. And it is a bit of a magic ingredient, and once you start using it, you're very reluctant to.
So you would only use that, you'd use that at 50% and not brush thinner?
Yeah, on my mast, for instance, which I just stripped back, the first coat was 50-50 Troll varnish, and then 20 Troll varnish, and then less, kind of 10%. And on the top coat, ideally you would just put varnish on, because anything into the varnish is going to have a minor effect on it. But
so you're using that instead of Epiphanes brush thinner?
yeah,
Okay.
Brilliant.
Just wanted.
yeah. Sorry, everything. So okay, I'm now measuring this. So it's a bit of a guessing game. I'm just not measuring it, but I am measuring it. It's a bit of a guessing game because you'll get a feel for how much you need to add, and the next day you'll think that was a bit of a tacky mix, or there's a bit of a loose mix. So it's good to remember what you've added. Stir, and it really is incredibly important to stir everything. The amount of complaints we get here in the sister company from products being faulty, and they're just fine. But the worst case is people using rubbed effect varnish or matte varnishes or eggshell varnishes, and they say they're glossy. Well, if you stirred them, they wouldn't be. Or if you finished it, you'd end up with gloss going to matte. It's because it's simply the chemists can't make all these ingredients all with exactly the same specific gravity. So you're going to be spending a fortune on a product that someone's developed to be perfect, and just completely wasting your time because it will be layered. One bit will be perfect. If there's any bubbles, let it settle out. But if you just stir gently, there won't be any bubbles. So, well, brush technique is, as I say, it's all to do with going fast. So just before you do anything, go over with a tack rag. Even though you've done all of the cleaning before and all of the vacuuming, there will just be more bits of dust will occur. And then you need, so if this part of your hull, you just need to work on a section about a foot wide. Apply the varnish to that and then move on. So this is still completely wet, so you blend in. Use the biggest brush you dare use. So if it's a hull, I'd be using 3-inch brush. But dabbling around with a little 2-inch brush or 1.5-inch brush is a complete waste of space. And then the technique really needs to be, you're trying to work this into the grain. So once you've got it on and you're happy that you haven't got any holidays or little holes, then put the brush at 45 degrees. So what that does is it makes the brush much finer, because those hairs, so you've got 10 hairs across the brush. Once you go like that, you've got 10 hairs in half the width. So you've got a much, much finer surface. And then vertically go down. Okay, the grain on this piece of wood goes down, but on your boat, normally the grain would be going across that way, and it seems a bit incongruous to finish off going this way. But it is better to finish vertically, because if there's any tendency for drips, and you go across this way, they'll tend to kind of lap up. So it is better to finish vertically. So now you move on to your next patch alongside. And don't try and spread the varnish out too far. It's I mean, people say, you know, lots of thin coats is better than one thick coat, but actually what you are trying to do is to get a thick coat. So if you put it on too thin, it will dry too quickly as well. Soak in, dry, and then you get all the brush marks happening. It's a big problem with people doing floors and things. They roll the material out. So I'm just working my way along in bands about 1 foot wide. You know, so I'm coming over here. I mean, it's not really going to show much up this, because it's going to soak into this wood. It's a good idea to rest the brush after a couple of hours, because the stuff starts to work its way up, and if you can stop before it gets right up into the top of the brush, it's quite a good idea to to stop and then so that's the technique basically, but you have to move fast all the time, otherwise what will happen is this will start to set up, and then you'll either get a lap mark and you'll see where it overlapped, or worse still, you get brush marks. But you shouldn't really, I couldn't bring my boat, I mean it's got loads of bits on it, this isn't the exhibition thing, but this piece of wood is my steering or my self-steering gear, which I bought in 1996. It's been across the Atlantic, it's been up to the Arctic. It's probably done 20,000-30,000 miles underwater. And it's not meant to go underwater, it's only softwood. And this has never been stripped back, this is just Ecufane varnish. So but there's no brush marks as such, you know, literally lots of specks. So you shouldn't ever get a brush mark. Now the other technique that the boat guards use is this, the roller. Oh, we need a tray. Not a tray.
No, maybe not this one.
I
I don't know.
think I've got one next door.
Okay.
Tack bag.
Yeah, I think if you got one.
Because that's the bark. Sorry.
Has you got it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just using a small roller here, which is a bit pointless in a way, but this is a great technique for 2 people. You know, you should be able to get around a boat in 30 minutes using this method.
Right.
So
Everything seems to take you a lot less time than it does some of us.
you have to tip off. So they're quite. Be careful with these rollers. They're American rollers. They don't fit English frames. So if you're going to buy the rollers, you've got to buy the frames off as well. Cut them 1.5 inch. So this would normally be a 7-inch roller. So I'd be working, you know, covering a bigger area. And then as I work my way along, you would just run it just down, gently down, just tipping off. Yeah. Put a bit on my rubber before I go home. Great. Let's just get well, you're not going to tell much because it's on a bare piece of timber, but the one thing you won't get is the brush marks. You've got some white spirits there. Now this is where white spirits is handy. I'll clear up the brush afterwards, but have you got, is that, yeah, okay, let's just, no, I'll clean it afterwards because it's going to take a bit too long. But what I would do is clean it twice. So clean it with white spirits, quite a lot of white spirits, it's quite cheap this stuff. Clean it out. This is a great little tool that no one makes anymore, but you know, I've got a couple I keep. But you can get, Purdy do make a little brush comb. It's quite handy just to brush the last out. And then once you've cleaned it twice with this, then fairy liquid and warm water really, really thoroughly. And then when the brush is finished, get a sheet of paper, it could be newspaper, but whatever. Put the brush in and then roll it over and over and over, and then just fold the end. You can feel the end of the brush, the tip there. Fold that back and then just and then that will keep the dust off and it'll be ready for your next go. And Purdy brushes hold their shape really well, but other brushes don't hold their shape, but they will if you do this. And you know it's a varnish brush, so you're ready to go. Well, we've kind of pretty much done it, gone through everything apart from some questions. So I'll just, a couple of the common problems, just go through those. If you get brush marks, it's nearly always to do with working too slow. And if you're working too slow, it's either because you're covering a big area with a little brush, or the brush has got no body to it, so it's not got enough material, so you're constantly having to dab in. You might be working in the sun beating down will start to cake up the varnish too quickly. working in a breeze, poor technique. You know, you do really need
What
to.
just ambient air temperature?
Well, there are minimums and maximums. The varnish goes a bit thinner when it gets hot. I don't know what the minimum. There will, yeah. You have to read the instructions, and they are different on the varnishes, and some of them are probably the 2-pack is probably more critical than the single pack. The problem with working in low temperatures is normally to do with the day ends early and dew comes in and you get moisture in the air and such like. A little bit of rain after you've varnished actually is not as bad as you'd imagine. It's less bad than dew. You know, if you get just a tiny little shower comes down, the varnish is slightly set up. It'll make tiny little craters on the top, but at least if it's not your top coat, it'll sand off okay. And the same with dust. It's not too bad if you've done the varnish and the dust comes, because it will just sit on the top of the meniscus of the varnish, and you can kind of wash it off or knock it off. But if you're varnishing and the Volvo estate drives through the yard, then you've got a bit of a problem. Yeah, the other way of getting brush marks is if you try and spread the varnish too far. I mean, you really want to get it so it's almost running. You want to get on as much as you possibly can, really. But yeah, you just have to get a feel for that point where you've gone a bit too far. If you get the odd run, I think it's quite good, or the odd lap. It just means you're right on that kind of cusp. And the other way, yeah, the other reason you've got brush marks is because you haven't conditioned the varnish down. With our trolling, it just tends to kill brush marks. Yeah, blooming, that problem is always to do with moisture in the air, condensation. We get loads of problems with people in the winter mainly, even working indoors. You know, if it's like a shed or a warehouse, especially if you're working low down, the cold temperature at the bottom.
The other thing with that is if you're working in a shed, I've had it where the heaters have kicked in intermittently, and so
Right.
the temperature actually is changing,
Whizzing up and
or
down.
causing kind of airflow, breeze
Yeah.
inside.
Well, blower heaters would be a disaster if you're varnishing. You don't want anything like that. You just want stillness, really. I mean, yeah. Specs in the varnish, it's nearly always bad brush hygiene. Actually, there's one little thing I haven't shown you. It's a good bit of kit. If you're working inside the boat, lighting. That is an indestructible work light. You can drive a lorry over that. Drive a lorry over it 100 times, and it fits on tripods. You can throw it in a locker. You can run it off 12 volts. You can run it off 24 volts. You know, it's really brilliant. If you're trying to, if you're varnishing in here, you just toss it down, and you get a really, really nice light. It throws the beam. It's such a clever piece of equipment. It's even got 2 different angles here, so it can sit at that angle or at that angle. But it's good bit of kit. Yeah, and if you work in really good light, when the light's not there, of course, the results look really, really nice. Oh, and it's got a hook. Yeah, runs and drips, well, obviously varnishing too heavily, but the other time when you're going to get runs and drips is where you're working around scuppers and things, and the brush just wipes off, and it's pretty hard. You're going to get one at some point. Obviously, after a while, you realise you're getting them, and you be a bit more careful at those points. Yeah, okay, well, I think we're there, really.
One quick question. We've
Yeah.
put an immaculate coat of varnish on, but this is not the first. What about prepping for the second coat
Yeah.
and subsequent coats?
Right, yeah, work your way through the abrasive. So the first coat, 120 grit.
Right.
Then I'd go 240
Mhm.
and then 320, and stick with 320 between coats.
Right.
And on the last coat, you might want to go 400. You can
Okay.
see 320 through the varnish.
So
with a
again,
magnifying
rub down
glass.
or sand down and take the.
Yeah, well, this first coat, you'll need to, well, yeah, it's good to leave it for a while because this does all sorts of things. It raises all the grain out of the timber. There's also a heck of a lot of material in there, so it'll be soft for longer. And when you sand, you might find it a bit of a cloggy sand, so it'll be your worst. So try and leave it for 2 or 3 days if you can to go really hard. Then sand that back with 240. And once you've got the next coat on,
And wiping it down with what?
yeah, isopropyl alcohol.
Isopropyl.
Yeah, that will just flash off.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then, yeah, put your next coat on and then go 240. And even after 2 coats, you start to get a nice gloss. With 3 coats, you've got a nice finish.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's where you get tempted to say, you know, that looks nice, let's leave it. But that's a big mistake, because if you haven't got 6 coats on, it won't get through the whole year. And if you can get through the year, then the next year you'll get an extra coat on. Because if you don't get through the year, you're back to where you start. So you've really got to hit it on that first year. Now you don't have to sand between coats. There are a couple of things you can do. There's a product called Rapid Clear, and I think International got a product as well which is slightly thinner. And you can do all your build-up coats with Rapid Clear. It doesn't have the same gloss, but you can then sand and put high gloss on top.